Howdy, folks. Happy Wednesday. Happy hump day. We have a series still. We will have game 6 on Friday, right? This is the thing. It's like, why is there so the wide gulf of days in between? Not to say it should be like game 5 on Tuesday and game 6 on Wednesday, but 2 whole days in the middle of a series, and we had 2 whole days. I know the Cav, they had there was a break of 2 days, but the reason they did that was because they didn't want to conflict with the NBA final. Well, the NBA final is over with now, so
but then it's too late to change it for
right.
television. That's the problem.
So. Right. So, but we will have to wait until Friday to see if the Florida Panthers will clinch. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but we're going to start with the pre-show, and normally Russ would be here, but I'll start with it. And we had a momentous passing in the world of baseball yesterday, where Willie Mays, the great Willie Mays, passed away at the age of 93. And Kev, I'm too young to have seen him play in person. He retired, I think, when I was 6, but I've seen not enough archival footage, and obviously Ken Burns' baseball series, where we saw multiple angles of the catch in the 54 World Series against Cleveland. But this is an all-time player. Some people say the best of all time. I would say top 3 or 4 of all time, but a phenomenal player. And
yeah, I saw on Twitter someone had a composite look at what the broadcasters had to say during their baseball games, and a few of them were highly emotional, and I understand that. When I was a kid, like today, the idea of a multiple tool player is pretty standard. We talk about guys that can do everything. But in the 60s, when he was in his heyday, that wasn't the case. You thought of baseball and you thought of, Babe Ruth, who was, had a pretty wide girth and, wasn't stealing any bases, when he did, or nor was he playing, great defense. But Willie Mays, could do it all. And how many years did we hear like he's the most underrated superstar? I mean, they're still saying it. Yesterday, I heard people saying that, and that's probably an accurate assessment of all the superstars. He could have been better than all of them, but he never seemed to get enough credit for that. So very few, as big of athletes as we think we have, very few, I think, get accorded the sort of salute that Willie Mays got yesterday.
Yeah. Well,
it was passing.
I think, okay, and I might be wrong, but I know, obviously in the 50s in New York, you had Willie, Mickey, and the Duke. I'm sure there were at that point there was a racial component to it. Him being one of the first black superstars to, after Jackie Robinson, after Larry Doby in the American League. It was Willie Mays. It was Willie McCovey. It was Hank Aaron. Breaking in and becoming superstars in baseball. Mantle played for the Yankees, so he was I think the more popular of the 2 players. But in terms of longevity, in terms of defensive ability, I mean, Mantle wasn't as good defensively as Mays was after his knee injury early in his career. He had a fantastic arm. He was a switch hitter at the plate, but Mays had unbelievable power. He was a fast player deep into his career, into the 60s. Then he started to fall off. But Jan, I don't think there's any question about. And also, I think what a factor is that the Giants moved from New York to San Francisco, so it sort of ripped up his fan base and then transferred it to the West Coast. So all these were, I think, factors for him being slightly underrated. But I think in retrospect, he is one of the greats.
Yeah. So, and a couple of things to that. So, interesting enough, Mantle and Mays faced each other in the 51 series, which is when Mays has gotten called up on Rookie of the Year, and Mays actually hit the fly ball where Mantle tore his knee up. And the backstory is, it's supposedly with DiMaggio, they had said, if DiMaggio calls you off the last minute, get away. He did. He stepped in a sprinkler head, which clearly impacted his speed, impacted his defensive ability a little bit. As you mentioned, also, he lost 2 years when he got drafted. So he missed 52 and 53. He was beloved in New York, but moving to the West Coast, as you said, the ironic part is I think somebody had put the quote where Khrushchev, I think, had visited, and they said it's amazing in San Francisco they cheer Khrushchev and boo Mays because they seem to have liked Orlando Cepeda better than Mays based upon what they thought were the expectations of what Mays can bring. But yeah, Mays could do it all. He could hit for power, throw, obviously play defense, steal. I mean, he was a 30-40 guy before 30-40 guys were in vogue. He was the first guy to do it. He garnered, I think, even more additional support as his career went on. And he also played in a pretty horrific park to hit in. Anywhere else but Candlestick, he probably would have hit well over 700 home runs. But the winds there and the way the ballpark played, repressed some of his home run numbers. And as Kevin sort of said, I was obviously listening to the Met broadcast, and Keith Hernandez grew up in San Francisco and was a huge Mays fan. You can hear the emotion in his voice because his voice started cracking when he was describing Mays. But you hear I don't know if people saw, if you go on Twitter and see the meeting between Vince Scully when he met Mays for the first time. It's phenomenal. It's about 2.5 minutes, and the reverence Scully shows for Mays is just amazing, knowing what we think of Scully, right? And you think about him having that for another player, and just you can just see the awe in his face and the reverence he had talking about when he actually met with him for the first time.
Not only another player, but another player that played for the enemy. Not only the New York Giants compared to the Brooklyn Dodgers, but the San Francisco Giants with the LA Dodgers. So to have that kind of respect is definitely something. But
and the television aspect of it, we forget what television was like in the 60s. But growing up, if you were a baseball fan, in the 60s, you saw your local team. You didn't see all 162 games, but you might have saw 40 or 50. And then your only other option to see any live baseball was Saturday afternoon baseball. Right. And you only, at least in the Midwest, you only got the Yankees. I mean, there were no 4 o'clock games. You got 1 o'clock, you got the Yankees, and that was your option. So a lot of people in the United States simply didn't see either Aaron or Mays because, unless they made it to the World Series, you weren't going to see him on television.
Ak, I just have to share this especially with you, since we're both we're all concert goers, but to a greater or lesser extent. But I paid more for any concert than I've paid for the one that I went to last night, which was Sarah McLachlan in a local venue near Buffalo. And I didn't do that on purpose. It was one of those deals where I'm going to buy tickets and I hit, press for the one ticket, and you're sort of stuck that you've got 5 minutes to decide whether you want it or not. And you know that if you opt out of it, you're going to sit 30 rows further away. So I sucked it up and spent the money on this ticket. And it was not front row, it was not VIP, but it was relatively close. And it was, it was a hunk of change. So I go to the show last night. It's say 5 rows from the stage on the very left.
Okay.
And the opening act comes out and plays in 45 minutes, and then they set up for the show, wheel out her piano,
right,
and the camera that is set up on stage for the projection behind her, they set that up, and it's in direct line with where I'm sitting. And
don't they know who you are, Mike?
Well, obviously not. But I am not one, even though you'll find this hard to believe, I am not one to complain. And when I spent this kind of money for a ticket, at the first person I found, I said, here. Oh, yeah. I said, here, sit down in this seat.
Yeah.
And they said they actually sat down, looked at it, says, I spent X amount of dollars for this seat, and this is the effing view that I got. And you tell me if you're satisfied or not. So the lady comes back after a few minutes and says, okay, we can do this. There are a couple seats up front that are unoccupied. I can let you go up there. If those people show up, you're gonna have to move back to your seat. I'm like,
All right.
okay. They didn't show up, and I had front row seats for the rest.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
Well, yeah, but I had to complain.
Still though, the end is the end. You got
Such a stretch for Michael Jello. What a stretch for Mike.
God.
This is why
Complain.
this is why we need to work with you as a psychiatrist. Think about this for a second. What do you remember more about last night? The sitting in the front row watching one of your favorite performers, or the fact you had to complain about the ticket?
The complaining. I've sat in the front row for Sarah McLachlan many times.
But still,
I would have been very happy sitting in the seat that I was in that I paid the money for.
But you got a good seat. That's awesome though.
Yeah, but I was worried for half the show that the people were going to show up.
All right.
If we're not there half an
Well,
hour.
that's true. I know that's stress because I mean, as a person who used to always had the worst seats in the spectrum and used to move down every game to the lower bowl, and we would hunt out our seats and sneak down there in between periods all the time. I know that fear of waiting for somebody to come to the game. I know that fear very well. So.
Yeah, I do too.
You know, honestly, in the 70s, 80s, and even into the 90s, that was the trick in Buffalo.
Yeah.
You buy tickets in the 300 level. You wait till the end of the first period. You pick out the section where there's like 3 rows of empty seats, and then you move down, and nobody ever calls you on it. But now
it always works.
Now the ushers are there, and even after the first period, they're going to ask you, "Let me see your ticket" or something like that. So that's shot.
Yeah. All right, well, let's get going here. We got a lot to get into. We have a trade.
Yes, we have a trade.
All right. Hello, Hockey World. It's Wednesday, June 19th, 2024.
I'm Michael Lagello, and I'm always pissed off.
I'm Jan Levine, and we know Michael's always pissed off.
I'm Pete Tessier, banished to the bedroom.
Kevin Allen, Detroit Hockey Now.
Anna Mecklen, and you're watching the HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. And we have, not only do we have the finals to talk about, but we have a trade, and a major trade, long time coming trade. I think we should start with the trade.
Yeah, okay.
I'm going to say that. Let's start with the trade. All right, so Markstrom goes to New Jersey. I was tracking this a little bit the last couple of days. I knew that they were in on Allmark as well. And a source of mine just told me that they came pretty close to Allmark, actually, but the Allmark, they wanted a little bit more. What actually did they get, Mike? What's the trade here?
The trade is defenseman Kevin Ball and a 2025 first-round pick, the Devils 2025. The Devils 2025 first-round pick. Surprisingly, not the 10th overall pick in the upcoming draft, which a lot of people had been reporting was being shopped. Maybe that's what the price would have been for Allmark. But in the deal, also the Flames are retaining 31.25%. Right, I haven't figured out the exact amount there, but it's a $6 million cap hit, so that's probably around
about 4.1 mil. I think it is that New Jersey's on the hook for.
Yeah, so 1.9 million, which I mean, 4.1 million for Markstrom the final 2 years of the deal is not a bad piece of work. I mean, I honestly think this is a great deal for the Devils, Kev, because you know,
plus the pick is top 10 protected also, Mike.
Yes, not only is he still a really good goaltender at 34 years old, but $4 million is around great cap hit.
Kevin?
Yeah, I don't think they gave up anything. I mean, you're always a first-round pick, but as long as they're a good team, you know, we've all, in recent months, most of us have been kind of talking about how, we've kind of in the media been misreading the draft. And, once you're beyond the 16th pick in the first round, you have the dice in your hand. You're at under 50% as to get a player. So, it's difficult. So, as long as they perform, I mean, I think that's, I guess the only argument from Calgary is, I mean, they would probably say he probably hasn't been the same goalie over the last 2 seasons.
He definitely hasn't been the same goalie. I mean, he hasn't.
He played better last year than he did the previous year. But I mean, okay, the situation here now is, Peter, they've got, I mean, Calgary had a situation where they had Vladar and they had Dustin Wolf. Wolf, I believe, was out of waivers. So it wasn't going to be a situation where they could send him down. So they were either going to carry 3 goalies And Markstrom apparently was pissed off that he had said he would go to New Jersey.
Oh, yeah, this was a big – they had to make this trade. Let me just throw that out there. They had to make this trade because Markstrom had already decided. When he had already said he was going. And basically what I was told when the trade fell apart, he was told, don't worry, you're still going there. We're going to – that's going to happen. So, yeah.
But the return – I mean, we were hearing Dawson Mercer or Alexander Holtz. We were hearing the 10th overall pick. And now it turns out – and Kevin Ball's a serviceable NHL defenseman, but he's not Mercer or Holtz.
Can I throw something in here real quick, Peter, before you come in?
Yeah, go right ahead.
The Ullmark, so the Ullmark deal that I was told, okay? So tell me what you think about this and which deal you think is better, okay? So the Ullmark deal, and, you can say – you can also decide which goalie you'd rather have, Ullmark or Markstrom. That's a hard one for me. I'm not quite sure.
It depends on the cost. It depends.
Right.
I mean,
the 10th overall pick this year.
Yeah.
And Marino. John Marino. Plus something else, but nothing like so significant, but something else.
To that point, I don't know what Ullmark's salary is, but
$5.
the fact that
$5 million for 1 more year.
Yeah, 1 more year. And Markstrom has 2 more years, right?
Right.
2 years.
Right. 2 more years. So they're only paying 69% of his salary.
Yep.
Like, cash is king in the NHL right now. And cash is cap space. So if you've got a willing partner to eat some of that, and you knew you had the leverage with Markstrom, I don't think it's a bad deal. I mean, Markstrom... What are you going to get? The question is what do you do with 2 years of Markstrom to prepare for the end of the 2 years? That's what New Jersey just bought. And they got Calgary to subsidize it. They got 2 years of time to figure out what comes next and how they're going to address that. Because having Markstrom carry you through after that probably isn't a realistic, viable option if you're on the upswing as a team, as your number one. So you're going to have to figure that out. You bought time with that. You got Calgary to subsidize it.
And Jan, the Devils go from, possibly one of the worst tandems last year, an unsettled tandem with Akira Schmid and Nico Dawes and Vanacek, who they traded. And now, other than the Rangers, and maybe you could argue maybe one other team, they have now Markstrom and Jake Allen. That's a pretty good one, too.
Yeah, I mean, Allen was not particularly good in Montreal, though part of that obviously could be Montreal. He was much better when he got over to New Jersey. I mean, Markstrom, I saw a couple of things. So Markstrom normally plays about 50 to 55 games a year. So you're looking at about a 2-to-1 split, which gives Allen a good amount of games. He's a solid backup, not necessarily an elite goalie anymore, but a solid backup. And, going back to the original point, if they do really think Dawes is the goalie of the future, that gives him 2 more years in the minor, at least 1 more year in the minors to marinate, because Allen is signed for this year only. And then he potentially comes up next year as the backup for Markstrom. And if he performs well, he could be the next in line. He kind of got rushed a little bit this year, had a couple of decent games, but he got rushed. And in terms of the offer, I mean, look, I think Marino in general is a much better defenseman than Ball. Ball, in my opinion, kind of is more of a third pair D-man. I think Marino is more of a second pair D-man, but Marino's also got $4 million in salary for the next couple of years. So part of that is the expectation of how much do you expect the cap to rise? It rose, $4.5 million this year, $5 million? If you presume the next rise, the same rise, the next 2 years afterwards, that cap is inconsequential for the most part, because you've had enough cap room to do it. And I think the issue is with all the rumors and innuendo and conversation as to what the original return was going to be. I never thought Mercer would go, but I thought Holtz was a likelihood in the 10. And let's suspend belief and say, was Holtz in a 10 to go from Holtz in a 10 to a top 10 protected pick in 2025 and Kevin Ball is a pretty wide disparity between the two offers.
Yeah, they had him. I mean, they had him where they wanted him. I mean, they knew Markstrom was going to go there. There was no other option. They really were stuck, in my opinion. And now this also gives New Jersey room, getting moving Ball and getting the cap space too, that they have now, gives them room to go after somebody in free agency, which they're going to do, and they clearly, I was told today Brendan Dillon is on their radar big time, I think that's a good possibility. And
there's been a lot of connection between Dillon and Vancouver.
I
mean, I don't doubt that New Jersey may be busy in terms of, I would say, second level players, but I don't know. I mean, with the money that they have invested Heishier and Hughes and Timo Meyer and Dougie Hamilton. I think they're going to make minor moves. I don't think they're going to make anything major.
I don't think it's going to be major, but I do think, there are going to be a lot of moves. A lot of moves. And Kevin, I wanted your opinion on this too. A lot of trades. Trades, I think, right? Like, you feel that?
I think this has had to be a lot tougher than we're making it out to be, the decision on this, simply because unlike Peter, I don't think they're in, let's try to figure out and bridge the gap to give us time to figure out what we're going to do in 2 years. I think they're in the, we got to be much better than we were last year, because the expectations on this team are much higher. They're expected to be a contender, and I think Allmark is the better goalie.
Yeah.
I just think he is. Now, saying all that, for all the reasons you guys just mentioned, it's hard to pull the trigger. I mean, you still got to think about the future, and getting that 10th pick, that's an important asset. And even though they said they were willing publicly to trade it, I think it's harder to pull the trigger on that. So I think they were probably weighing the difference between the two goalies versus giving up, that number 10 pick. And from Boston,
and the last time they gave up a pick that high, right, was the Corey Schneider deal, where they dealt the 9th overall pick that ended up
that turned out to be Bo Horvat.
So I think ultimately, if I'm sure Tom Fitzgerald, would say that, he probably would prefer to get Allmark, but the price was probably deemed to be too high.
A couple factors here, though, and I don't think it was ever confirmed, but we do know that Allmark blocked a trade at the deadline to a team. And I have heard speculation it was New Jersey. So if it was New Jersey, then that was a non-starter from the very beginning.
I heard his press conference, and he talked like a guy. And again, you had to read a little bit between the lines, but he talked like a guy who was resigned to the fact that he was going to have to go somewhere, and he just seemed to be more open than he was, during the season when he didn't even really it wasn't at that time they were trading him. I'm sure he still believed he had a chance to be the Bruins playoff goalie. So
the other factor is, and we were talking about, Markstrom has 2 years left in his contract, now manageable at a little over $4 million. Allmark's got 1 year left at $5 million. More than likely, any team that's trying to trade for Allmark is also trying to extend Allmark. And if he, maybe he's willing to go any place now because he knows Swayman's going to get paid in Boston and he's going to be the number one. But it's a question of where he wants to go or where he's willing to sign to go.
I think that's true with players, Mike, but people don't like to extend goalies.
No, they don't.
For whatever reason, it's shortest term possible for a goalie. If that's what you want.
Well, to that point, and Kevin, this is why I think the 2 years is the window. I agree with you that with Markstrom, they've got to fix things and he's an option, but he's 34. So you've got 2 years of Markstrom. Allmark's 30. So do you want to extend Allmark at more than $5 million and hope you get something right with a goalie you're getting from someone else? Or do you want to take someone at 34 for 2 years with subsidy? I look at the risk management in that, and I say I go with Markstrom, even though I do agree with you that Allmark's likely the better goalie. But from a risk management standpoint, I think it's safer to go with Markstrom. But the point being is, should the Devils be safe or should they be aggressive? And I'm not sure what the right move is.
I'm going with aggressive. And I think, X point was a really good one, and this has really been a recent development, but it's almost like the GMs, all have seen what happens when the guy comes up underneath, and you're sitting with a goalie with 3 or 4 years. So I think actually, I'm not so sure they would have tried to re-sign him. What's wrong? Don't be afraid to just go into the season and, see what happens. Let's see where we're at. Because if he plays well and he likes it, he's going to sign anyway.
You look really bad if you extend him and he plays terrible. You just really look bad.
Right. So you better just put him out there and look and see what happens. And, like I said, if he likes it, he will resign anyway. And if he doesn't, you don't want him anyway.
Exactly. Well, Kev, I'll just say this. I think there are a number of teams right now that are in the same boat as the Devils that have a level of desperation to make the playoff. I mean, at least the Devils a couple of years ago made the playoffs and won a round. Detroit, I think, is in that boat. They barely missed out. Buffalo is definitely in that boat right now. There is significant talk, and I've been talking about this for a month, that Jeff Skinner is probably going to be bought out when the buyout window opens 48 hours after the Cup Final ends.
Right.
And if that happens, the Sabres, they take a cap hit down the road, but they open up $7.5 million in cap space.
Right.
And everything is pointed right now to they either make the playoffs or there's going to be a serious change, probably with the general manager. Lindy Ruff just got hired. So Kevin Adams is singing for his supper, and their first round pick is on the trade block. They're opening up cap space for bottom six guys. I mean, it's desperate times, desperate measures in Buffalo. Yeah, sure. And I think it's like that in a number of places.
Well, definitely Ottawa, Buffalo, Detroit are all in the same boat, right? They're all sort of in the same world where they're all expecting to make the playoffs by now. And, and yet they're in a division where you've got Toronto, obviously Florida and Tampa. Tampa maybe is heading in the other direction, but it doesn't still feel like Tampa's going to get in there and still turn around. Like it feels like Tampa's still going.
Tampa's going in their direction. They just added McDonough back on. Yeah.
Right. And I think we signed Stamkos. It's like bringing the band back together.
Yeah.
I mean, I think New Jersey's got to get a physical winger. They lack toughness. I mean, they are a team that's, I hate to use the term soft. I'll use the term skilled, but there's not much grit. I don't think Timo Meier has a ton of grit. Hughes, I know a lot of people think as much talent as he is, he needs to be a bit more grittier. He's got a little bit softness to him. So I think if they're going to get a winger, they got to get somebody that's got a little bit of bite that can go on that line also. It needs to be a target for them.
Yeah.
I was writing a story today about talking about who the Red Wings, if they have any money left, and they may not after they sign Lucas Raymond and Moritz Seider, about who they may go after. And I've started to hear a little bit of an undercurrent about Dakota Joshua.
Yeah.
And, the Red Wings, if you look at their team just watching it, they're just not physical enough. And, their hits per game just is down near the bottom. I think they were 24th or 25th. But what I didn't sort of notice until I started to look at it, and it was really kind of surprising to me, in the Atlantic Division, they have 4 of the top 10 top hitting teams, and then they've got Ottawa up there as well.
Wow.
And the Red Wings are just dead last in the Atlantic Division. It hits by a significant number. Everyone has at least 300 more hits per season than the Red Wings. And so I guess, we all know Florida hits, and we've watched in the playoffs. But I think it was a little bit shocking to me that, even the Tampa Bay Lightning are in the 7th, and I think Ottawa was 10th. So you got five Atlantic Division teams in the top 10 hitting teams. So
I think the top 3, Kev, were Florida, Boston, Toronto.
Yes, that's correct.
And Toronto, nobody thinks of Toronto as a hitting team, but they definitely emphasize that more this year.
They gear themselves up to beat Boston. They've been piling on players to get more and more aggressive. And then now to beat Florida, which is you have to be tough to get out of that division. Basically, that's the bottom line. Like that division is going to be, unless you can just outskate somebody completely.
Other than Seider, Kevin, who hits on that team for Detroit? I mean, Seider does.
Yeah, Gerard hits a little bit, but he's not a 200.
No.
He's 170. So, but it's funny. I just want to bring this up because I think it's kind of funny. I felt like a 1970s teenager again because in my head I'm going, okay, well, if they get Dakota Joshua, and that's 245, and Seider, that's 450, and that's 600 hits off these 3 guys. I'm thinking, it's not the 70s. Why am I talking like this? So,
wait, Dakota Joshua has going up through the roof. That kid is up with a bullet. For somebody who wasn't that high on anybody's radar 6 months ago.
My good friend, if you look at his history of putting out tweets and stuff around the free agent time, if a guy is very popular, he always lists 11 teams are interested. It's always 11. I don't know why that is, but I'm talking about Pierre LeBrun. Pierre LeBrun always lists 11 teams are always interested. And
Yes.
I'm going to say that Dakota Joshua will be one of those players who will have 11 teams.
And,
you know,
and Kev, this is the thing, Jan. I mean, okay, I've known Dakota Joshua, seeing him at development camp with the Maple Leafs when he was a Leaf draft pick out of Ohio State. So I've seen him. You know, he's not the same player that he was back then. Obviously,
not even close.
Went through the Blues, but you know, the pieces were there. They just didn't recognize that this type of guy, after improving, that he would get to this point. He was a force in the playoffs for Vancouver. He's big. He's fast. He's not particularly great offensively, but a guy like him is going to get if there's 11 teams, he's going to get overpaid. It's going to be
he's going to get vastly overpaid.
Yeah.
I think the number's going to start with
again,
that first number is going to start with a 4 AAV per year, basically.
Right.
Let's
He's
try
not
to
getting
be
overpaid. Someone's overpaying for him.
Let's try to be modern sports writers and acknowledge that the average salary in the NHL is $3.5 million.
Exactly.
So they're going to pay him as an average player. So that the projections for AFP Analytics, who does a pretty decent job. They're not always right, but a pretty decent job. They have him at 3.2, which is a little below average for a 3-year deal. Now, if he gets the 4-year deal, they have him. So if he gets the 4, then he's a little bit above, and maybe he will get the 4, as Jan said, because of being one of 11 teams are interested.
We'll get to 4 because the Florida Panthers are so good. You know what I mean? Like the reality is, like, people see like there aren't that many power forwards, you know, like, and he is a power forward, and I think of him as a power forward, at least. Do you guys not think of him as a power forward?
He's a power forward who can play center.
Who are we talking about?
Dakota
Hasn't played
Joshua.
there much, though. Hasn't played there much. I just looked this up.
Yeah.
And, he's only taken like 70 faceoffs a year over the last 2 years. Now, that's not
he's a power forward, though. I agree with that.
But
he's a power forward worth over $4 million a year, Russ.
But let's sort of see. Can you be a power forward and not be a 20-goal scorer? I think
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, to me, then you're just a physical player.
Yeah, that's what I think too.
Yeah, like power forward denotes like on the verge.
You got to be on the edge of 20.
Like Josh Anderson is a power forward.
Okay, if that's your criteria,
How'd that contract work out?
I know.
How'd that contract work out?
And that's my point. That's my point, Jan. It's like, do I think Dakota Joshua is a good player? Has he turned himself into a really effective and useful player? Yes. Do I think he's a $4 million? Even if the cap goes up to $90 million, do I think he's a $4 million player? No, because there are gaps in his game. Same with Josh Anderson. It's health. It's, his ability to rein in some of his stupidity in terms of he takes bad hits sometimes. I mean, there are a number of factors. If you get an effective power forward, that guy's worth his weight in gold. But you're paying, for Dakota Joshua, you're paying through the nose for somebody who might not equal his value of what he's getting paid.
True.
I mean, the thing about Joshua is he's 28.
Mm-hmm.
He just turned 28, and he's had a total of 184 NHL games.
Right.
I know.
So, I think someone will overpay for him, but it's going to be a dangerous overpay. I think the real kicker is going to be the term.
Yeah,
that's always the term. Like, you should never go more than 3 years with the guy.
Three or 4 at the most. But if there's 11 teams on him, like Kevin was saying,
do you think someone goes 5?
Yes.
I don't.
I do.
No.
I'm with Jan. I think someone will go 5.
I do too.
I don't.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting. The AFP analytics projection, the way I looked at it, again, I have no idea how they're thinking. Maybe it was all computerized and all that. But I looked at it and I said, well, what they're saying is we'll pay him less than the league's average salary, but we'll give him the extra year, because they have him at 4. So, if you're giving a guy an average salary over 3, it's 10.5. And so if you give him 3.2 over 4, that's 12.8. So now you're just paying him a little bit over average. So it's just so hard to make those determinations, what to do. But I don't know that someone will give him a 5th year, even though I think a lot of teams like him. But I heard him interviewed during the playoffs, and going back to Mike's really good point about it was always there, but he couldn't put it all together. Just hearing him speak, like you could hear the maturity that he now has, and I'm sure that's just totally represented in how he played. I think he just figured out how he needed to play to be this effective, and that's all the difference in the world. And that, like, the 4 years still takes him to 32. So it's not like he's going to be in his twilight.
Precisely.
So, and it's not like a 32-year-old like Jeff Skinner, who played in the league as an 18-year-old, and different body types, different types of players. Jeff Skinner's got 1,000 games under his belt at 32, whereas Dakota Joshua, even if he plays 82 games the next 4 years on a 4-year contract, he'll be less than 500. So a lot less.
The big stat for him, I think, that everyone's going to hone in on is, in the playoffs, 13 games, 74 hits. That's the one that everyone's.
That's a big stat.
When you look,
and 8 points. So 8 points, and 74 hits. Like that's what's gonna, if he's gonna get that 4th year, that's what's gonna earn him that.
I talked to somebody who was really interesting point, Kevin, along these lines. I talked to somebody yesterday, a GM, who said to me that he thinks the playoffs is a mini season, that he views it as and the playoffs start, it's such a fresh start for everybody. And he thinks that reset of everybody everybody coming back to 0 with points and everything like that, he thinks really a guy, so he'll go for a guy who's played more playoff games than not, because of that. He thinks he get an extra season almost. It's almost like an extra, like Dakota he had a great playoff season, but he looked totally different than he did in the regular season. He had a good regular season, but he really showed. And now the feeling is he's just going to check the next step, So everybody, but it was funny. 2 months ago, everybody had him as their secret. Like, now it's like, it's not a secret.
Yeah, he's not a secret anymore. No,
not at all.
Well,
last game here too, because
just two quick things. One, we'll find out in 15 minutes whether the rumors are true. But yesterday it was a little surprising. Barclay Goodrow from the Rangers was placed on waivers with 3 years left in his contract. There was some talk after the fact that this was sort of a gentleman's agreement between Mike Greer and Chris Drury, former teammates of the with the Buffalo Sabres, the GM of San Jose and the GM of the Rangers. The Sharks had the first claim, and Goodrow did play the first few years of his career in San Jose. And that what might be being worked on here is that San Jose will claim Goodrow off of waivers, and he will go to San Jose, and that'll clear $3.6 million off the cap for the Rangers. So, it's not a bad move, Kev, because we know that Goodrow is a good pro. He won 2 Stanley Cups.
Yeah.
You could play places worse than San Jose. They have Celebrini. They're looking for good pros to surround him with, and he's a leader. So it would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, although I don't know why you got to cut a deal with him. You throw him out there and kind of see what happens. Are we saying that he just made a call and say, will you claim him? Does he get something out of it? Like what?
I'm not sure they're getting anything out of it.
No.
They're
just saying. I don't
just
know
losing
why.
the salary. That's it.
Yeah, I don't know why there had to be a phone call. You just
what I'm saying is,
I think he would be claimed. I think it would have to be claimed.
He's going to be.
He's got a 15-team no trade clause, and there's rumors that San Jose might be on it. The only way he could potentially get there is for them to place him on waivers, but they may have just verified that if they do, that San Jose had interest. It's an odd deal in general. But I think the no trade clause had probably more to do with it than anything else.
I talked to Russ about it a couple of days ago, and I says if they traded Goodrow, I think there would be a number of teams out there that have the cap space that would want a good guy who's got something left. They could get a 3rd or 4th round pick. That's why I was surprised he was put on waivers before being potentially bought out. So, I mean,
I think there'll be multiple claims on him.
There will be.
yes.
I think there should be. I want to mention with the Ty Dellandrea trade something about him. This was one of the rare instances. Dallas rushed him. He was drafted too high where he was drafted in the draft. There was never going to be, at least in my estimation, a lot of offense coming out of him. And so now for San Jose, as long as they just put him in and he's like a third line center, he'll be fine. If they try and make him any more than that, I think they're going to be disappointed too.
That's interesting. That's very interesting.
I mean, on a bad team, he could play second line center for a while.
Yeah, no, definitely. I thought it was a good move. All right, so let's talk about the Stanley Cup Final, because this is it's become a very fascinating series. It started off like it wasn't going to be very, very good at all. In Game 3, I was watching Florida just take over. I just thought, geez, this is a sweep or 5 games most type series. But then Edmonton all of a sudden, outscored them 11-1 in 4 periods, and everyone goes crazy. And now here we are. So my question to you guys is I guess we'll start with Kev on this. And where are we, Kev? Like, where are we right now?
Well, I mean, when you open the window, people start to climb in, and I think that's exactly what's happened. And all of a sudden now they've given them confidence, and I think. Well, and I've seen several people say this, but I think it's true. Is all the pressure's on Florida now?
Oh, it is, yeah.
I mean, you don't want to be. We all know what happened between the Maple Leafs and the Red Wings. Right. 1942. Like, how long have we been writing about that?
Yeah.
And you can tell your wife that I agree with her that that what happened in the past doesn't affect, but it gets in people's heads, and no one wants to be that team that's listening.
Yeah.
So. I mean, we knew all along, like nothing really has changed. Like, Florida is still the better team.
Yeah.
But the Oilers have a scary team.
Right.
And, they can win a game. So.
Right. That's the thing to me. And although I will say, it felt like, in Game 4, Florida really just gave up after it got to like 3-1 or 4-1. It felt like they were like, okay, we're gonna save the rest of the series, which is never a really good idea. Last night, though, the second half of the game, Florida got back to where they were before.
Yeah, but
that they were coming on, and if Edmonton got lucky to get out of there last night with a win, I thought.
In watching this game this morning, because I obviously was at the concert last night. I mean, I had the hindsight of knowing what had happened early on, and the Connor Brown shorthanded goal completely deflated the crowd and the Panthers, and really, I don't think that they gained their footing until they were down 3-0, and Tkachuk scored that goal to make it 3-1. I think the mistake here for Florida is they stopped doing what they did in the first 3 games. In Game 4, probably because, like you just said, Ek, in Game 4 they got down early and they just stopped. But they had opportunities in Game 4 to sort of lay a hurting on Edmonton when the game was out of control. They really didn't do that. And last night, I think they were afraid of taking penalties at wrong times. They're not hitting Draisaitl. They're not hitting McDavid. It may be easier said than done because McDavid is so tough to catch up to, but they were laying the body on him in the first 3 games. They're not doing that. They're not hitting Bouchard. They've stopped playing Florida Panthers hockey. And if they keep playing the way that they're playing right now, then Edmonton is going to be the 42 Maple Leafs all over again.
The one thing I'll say, watching that game and even the last game, I did talk about on Sirius that first shorthanded goal, how it deflated Florida and definitely stung them again yesterday. But I realized late in the game why it stung them. Because Florida's power play right now is struggling so badly. They were making too many changes on it. And Connor Brown's smart enough to sniff out when they didn't have the right personnel playing at the point and next to the point. They went back, I'm pretty sure they went back to their old power play after that shorthanded goal because they realized – because they were making too many adjustments on the power play to try and get something going, and they were vulnerable, and I think they won't be vulnerable now.
Peter, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I know you're going to think someone's taking me over, but I'm going to give Edmonton some credit. They have absolutely disrupted Florida's zone entries in ways that I don't even think Florida's understanding how they're doing it. It's impressive. And frankly, that's something Paul Maurice struggled with when he was in Winnipeg too. I think he's a better in-game coach, but I think he falls back on his intuition more, where I think Knobloch is letting Paul Coffey do some work with his team. He's letting some of the data stuff that they're figuring out come into play and open-minded to that.
Yeah.
What they did in the last two games, particularly last night, was stopping zone entries against Florida, was not there in the first three games.
Right.
Florida's got to figure that out. They got to watch some film, and they've got to get back in. But in summary, though, this series is basically alive because of two shorthanded goals.
Yeah.
Take those away, the tide of this series is over.
And
somebody knew. I want to bring up that shorthanded goals I've always felt were like maybe the biggest momentum changer in series. If we go back to the famous one for me as a Flyers fan is Dave Poulin shorthanded two men short against Quebec Nordiques. You guys remember this at all? This is like a very famous goal. I talked to Dave Poulin about it recently. And it was very much like the Brown goal last night. It's the pass from one point to the other point that's just picked off straight up. Someone anticipates it, picks it off, and Poulin was off the races and beat whoever. I guess I forgot who the goalie was for
Dan Bouchard or Michel Dion or
starts with M for the for Quebec. But it was that and the shorthanded goal. And you remember like the Flyers when they came back from 3-0 against Boston, that was turned on a shorthanded goal by Mike Richards. Mm-hmm. That series it's shorthanded goals can very easily turn series. They really can. And here's the thing, I don't think that this series has turned. Like I felt like last night after what happened, after about midway through that game, I thought Florida got their game back.
Well, injuries can also affect things, and I'll just say this: the thing that shocked me the most, Jan, was late in the third period with the goalie pulled. The point there were five Florida forwards out there, and the one defenseman was not Brandon Montour. Who,
I know.
If he was healthy, which I think he's hurt because it was OEL. It was Oliver Ekman-Larsson. And don't get me wrong. A few years ago, Oliver Ekman-Larsson was one of the better defensemen in the league. But he's not that guy anymore.
He is right now, though, Mike.
No, he's not. He's not.
He is.
He's not the same guy, but he's playing pretty well.
He had the goal last night on the setup where he went into the slot and got the goal, right? So, look, my opinion on this is
uncommon. Go ahead, Jan.
I thought that Edmonton outplayed Florida in games 1 and 3. I thought they got Bobrovski'd. I mean, that's really why they lost. I mean, yes, the last two games, Bobrovsky struggled. The goal he gave up to McDavid was a horrible goal. It was, as Messier said, it was Patrick Kane-esque in terms of the angle.
It was a bad goal.
He got look, the great move by Brown, but he got beat on that one. I don't think Bobrovsky had a particularly good game. And as X said, look, in my opinion, if that second period is about 5 minutes longer, they're going and tied into intermission because Florida carried play the entire second half of that second period. Obviously, they got the goal by Perry, which was a brilliant move by McDavid, who's just been unstoppable. But Florida carried play, so they do have a little momentum, even though they got beat. But Edmonton coming back shouldn't have been that much of a shock because I thought they played great in games 1 and 3. They just got beat by a better goalie, and Skinner wasn't particularly good.
Yeah, to me, Bob was fine. He made some great saves to keep it 4-3, actually. Like you said, the one-on-one, the shorthanded, he wasn't going to stop. The other one that you said was the one bad goal I thought he had. Bob wasn't the reason, and he's not running out of gas like people might be saying in the chat room. That's not the issue. I think Florida just go with the original power play setup. You're not going to give up your shorthanded goals that way, even if you don't score on the power play, which, again, the Boston Bruins didn't do much on the power play either when they won. They only had like 1 or 2 power play goals themselves. It's still possible to win a Stanley Cup that way, but you can't let it be a detriment the other way and you give up goals.
That great power play quarterback Thomas Caberlet in 2011, I remember that.
I think that when watching when the Panthers are at their best, to me the whole Panthers game comes down to their defenseman pinching. Like that's where the Panthers kill teams. The Panthers have incredible defenseman pitching. Like they don't have any problem. Like Montour, Forsling, all of them have no problem going in deep on a pinch. Like they'll
Nico Mikkola is pinching in.
Yeah, and Miko Mikkola he's a really skilled player. Like he's a really interesting player. Like he's way better than I thought he was. But yeah, that pinch had stopped happening, and then last night suddenly it was back. And what's happening with Alan Ekman-Larsson, we've seen this with superstar players before that were like not superstars but star players. Like he was a star player. Put him into a Stanley Cup situation like that, and they get their starness back. They do. At first,
I think of Joe Nieuwendyk with the Devils. He wasn't that much anymore, but he actually scored a couple key goals for them in 03.
Yeah, right now he was out there. I do think Montour's hurt, but he was also out there because he was probably their best defenseman last night. And you could just see it. Like he was pouring it on.
McDavid has taken his game to another level. I mean, that's the best way to describe it. He was good early. He has been otherworldly the last 2 games. He has basically put that team on his back and said, we're not going to lose. We're seeing a superstar player who's been criticized in the past at times for maybe not stepping up. Not only stepping up, but showing emotion on the ice, which has been another criticism of him. Yeah. And he's becoming the guy that everybody wants him to be, is what he's become the last couple of games. I mean, you look at the body of work overall, his point production is ridiculous, but to have a back-to-back 4-point games is just ungodly. Games 4 and 5 of the Stanley Cup Series when you're looking at elimination.
Yeah, he is amazing. And Draisaitl is really not right now. Like that's the other thing is weird.
He's not. He couldn't even when he was in the offensive zone, he can't even do much.
Yeah, you can see
hurt. No question he's playing hurt.
Yeah, he's playing hurt, and it's interesting, but he's enough of a skilled presence that you can't, if he can play, you want him on the ice just because he's a distraction. Unlike Evander Kane. And since Evander Kane's been out, look at what Edmonton's done.
True. You know what was also
that was a lead in for Mike to just go off.
Well, I know we're not going to let him Mike do that. But what was interesting to me?
No, Peter. I quietly agreed and smiled because Evander Kane has been a non-factor for most of these playoffs.
I'll tell you something though. What is helping Edmonton in this series? No question. Versus the other series, is Florida wore teams down by the end of the series. All these extra days off are helping.
No question. They would be more worn down. You're right about that.
Florida would be taking them down. Having an extra day off between all these games, I mean, who obviously is also helping is Tkachuk, who is starting to get a little bit more.
Was unbelievable last night.
He's getting healthier. You can see he's a different player.
He was a force. I think we all expected, especially when he blocked that shot going into the empty net, that maybe Florida was going to get that goal.
That was unbelievable.
That was an unbelievable.
It's so a shame. It's such a shame that they didn't. Like that, you wanted to see him go back the other way and score a goal there because and then McDavid just did right afterwards is really anticlimactic to that play, which is one of the best plays I've ever seen. Like
the best video was the Janmark post.
Oh yeah,
right before that, and they showed the Edmonton bench, and it was like you've never seen more players sort of crestfallen that he came this close to wrapping up the game. They're like,
Skinner did make a big glove. I think it was a glove save on the high post. I think it was Tkachuk who did take that shot kind of late, like a couple minutes left. That could have been a tie game. I think we all think, at least I do, if it would have gotten tied up, I think Edmonton would have been in trouble, but it never did. So.
But the camera angle of the goal cam, from inside the goal, of Tkachuk's face as he's sliding on the ice, and you can just end pulling his stick back to try to get. It was just one of the best cameras that you just forget it. It was incredible. I mean,
we're lucky in the playoffs. Goalie cam is there every game. When it's not the playoffs, when it's the regular season, goalie cam is not there every game. There's a schedule to it. You have to.
Okay.
They for some reason, and because I've spoken to somebody about this, you could probably imagine who.
Yeah.
For some reason,
it's only on Saturday nights in Toronto. Russ.
Yeah, they don't allow it like every game, and they should. They should have it every game.
Why don't they allow it? Because it's an extra angle. Maybe it's an extra angle that they have that makes it unfair in that game.
I'm not sure.
Probably costs.
That's silly, but that was just an unbelievable play. And Tkachuk just last night when he scored that goal, to give them the one goal back. I mean that timing of that goal was crazy. It was just that really at that point I felt like the Florida Panthers were going to win the series regardless. Now, do you think it goes? Going around? Do we think it goes to a game 7? Mike, yes or no?
No.
Me, yes. Kevin,
yes.
Russ.
No.
Peter?
No.
Jan?
Yes.
All right, so 3-3. I think that
But
I
Set
do.
a screen, yes.
If Florida gets to a lead, they're going to hold on and win. If Edmonton gets to a lead, that crowd is going to be jammed, and they're going to get pumped from it. I don't see them giving up a lead if they get a lead in that game.
If Shania Twain is in the crowd, no, never mind.
I absolutely think
He
it's
will
going to
be.
go back.
They're putting a statue in front for her now, I hear.
Shania Twain is the Kate Smith of Edmonton, although I don't know if you want to go down the Kate Smith road.
No, but that's okay. I turned down Shania when I had the chance. Anyway, so we all know that story, so I won't tell it again.
Yeah,
we do know that.
Yeah, so I think that I do think now if it comes now, we just said it's for those of us that think it's going to go back to a 7. Me, Kevin, and Jan, who's going to win Game 7?
Florida.
Kevin.
I think we got to wait and see what
All right
looks like. But I would say Florida's going to win the series.
Yeah, I think so. Jan.
I'm gonna go Florida.
I think so too. I think Florida. I think Florida would take that. Yeah, I do think the series is going to start to wear down the Oilers a little bit.
It's weird because up until this game, the Stanley Cup Final and the NBA Final mimicked each other completely.
Yeah.
But now the Calder Cup between Hershey and Cleveland went 3-0, 3-3, and then it went to overtime in Game 7.
No, not Cleveland, Coachella.
Coachella. Sorry. And then it went 3-0 to 3-3, and then I think the team that was up 3-0 won Game 7. So
in overtime, wow.
In overtime, yeah. So
I mean, I'm even though I have a personal interest in Florida and I have friends in Florida and stuff like that. I'm happy for Edmonton fans that they saw that Game 4 happened. I didn't want them.
Your friend threw the water bottle against the wall on camera. That's what your friend
saw
did.
That, yeah. Yeah.
He ripped a good fastball, man. I give him credit.
He's an athlete, that guy.
So he was imitating Pierre Dorian because he did.
What was he upset about? I saw that. I didn't see when it happened.
It was after the empty net goal.
After the empty net goal.
After the empty net goal.
Probably because he had to make all
very much like Peter Laviolette with the jelly against the wall when he was with the Flyers.
It's probably because he had to make all those plane arrangements to get everybody the hell backed up to Edmonton. That's what.
I mean, there's never been a moment, Kev, where I am happy that I am not a member of the media traveling between Florida and Edmonton. 2,500. I mean, first of all, I think probably the pool of media people were pissed off that Florida didn't wrap it up in Game 4, and now they have to go back to Edmonton for Game 6 and possibly back to Florida for Game 7. I mean, it's nuts.
Yeah. It
reminds me of
breaking news. Barclay Goodrow was claimed by San Jose.
There you go.
Hey, there you go, folks.
There we go.
It's an inside job.
This series does remind me a little bit of Edmonton, Carolina, though. You remember that series too? That was like, and that I did travel
the one I remember that it was a long distance, and this goes back and dates me in the Paleozoic era. But in '87, the Flyers and Oilers, and we were all back then. There were only like 2 flights out of Edmonton,
right?
And I remember when the thing was finally over, like the next day, because we had been back and forth. Right. Everybody was on. All the reporters were on this flight, and it was so overbooked. And they came a free flight. And they needed 10 spots. And they said, how many people want to take that? And nobody raised their hand. And then they doubled it. Nobody raised their hand. Like, I can't remember what the offer was, but it was like a $500 voucher and 2 free round tickets. And finally they, got it to, but nobody would, we had just been back and forth and the trip was long. And
Calgary, Tampa had to be pretty bad, right, Kev?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So before we go, I want to end this on what I thought was a funny moment. I love great retorts and on Twitter especially when it's funny. And someone was criticizing Ken Holland and Gord Miller, TSN announcer, is one of my favorite people.
Right.
He's always quick with the joke. In this case, just defended Holland. Says, "Well, what do you want? He got his team to the Stanley Cup Final." And the guy said, "Yeah, my dog could have got the Oilers to the Stanley Cup Final." Seconds later, Gord Miller said, I look forward to going to your dog's induction in the Hall of Fame. And I don't know why, but it just made my day.
That's fantastic.
That's a good line.
I got to go, guys. We'll see
All
you.
right, yeah, we all got to go. That's pretty much all the time we have for today. I think we're good. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey, and we'll be back. I guess we'll be back on Friday, probably. Right? Let's do Friday before the big Game 6. All right. Talk to you guys soon. Thank you, guys. Everyone.